Among East African countries, billions of externally borrowed money are lost to corruption every year. How much of the region's debt burden is self-inflicted? Uganda owes billions, Kenya owes even more. But every year, both governments continue to borrow money in the name of development. New hospitals, new roads, new hydropower dams, new industrial parks, and of recent, a standard gauge railway. But does this borrowed money really reach its intended use? Or is most of it lost through corruption, inflated costs, political patronage, mismanagement, and outright theft by government officials? Decades ago, both Kenya and Uganda had relatively manageable debt levels. But today, things look to be getting out of hand. Our governments are borrowing from international lenders, commercial banks, bond markets, China, Russia, and multilateral institutions like the World Bank. Uganda's total public debt currently stands at 130.9 trillion Uganda shillings. That is about 34.86 billion US dollars, representing roughly 52% of the country's GDP. Kenya's public debt has surpassed 10 trillion Kenya shillings, equivalent to 77.4 billion US dollars, accounting for more than 68% of its GDP. The borrowing is of course justified. We need development. Development requires infrastructure. Infrastructure requires money. Borrowing allows us to build now and pay later. And in theory, this makes perfect sense. A new hospital will make a healthier population. A new dam generates more electricity that attracts investment. A modern railway lowers transport costs and improves trade. The growth generated by these projects should eventually repay the loans. But this only applies if the money is used effectively and efficiently. And for us, unfortunately, that's where the problems begin. Corruption doesn't always look like a bribe from one hand to another, or a briefcase full of cash. Sometimes it looks like an express highway whose construction costs 5 times more than it should. Corruption looks like a project that has received full funding but never completed on time, or a government contract awarded to politically connected companies. And as most economists say, corruption is the hidden cost on development, because when borrowed money is not put to its intended use, governments will often compensate by borrowing more. And the result is a vicious cycle. Borrow, lose money, borrow again, lose more, repeat. And eventually, the high debt levels slow down economic growth and limit development ambitions. Take Uganda, for example. Year after year, audit reports have highlighted missing funds, procurement irregularities, and questionable spending, all by government institutions. Public scandals involving government agencies have been repeatedly reported in the media. From Temangalo land, Karamoja iron sheets, 60 billion Bank of Uganda money heist, and ghost pension schemes, among others. And Kenya, who have embarked on some of Africa's most ambitious infrastructure projects, are facing similar challenges. For the current financial year alone, Uganda plans to borrow 25.94 trillion Uganda shillings from domestic and external sources to finance the national budget deficit and to also refinance mature debt. The same country is said to be losing more than 3.6 trillion Uganda shillings every year to corruption and fraud. Kenya, on the other hand, is set to receive a loan worth 750 million US dollars from the World Bank by the end of June 2026. The same country lost 2 billion Kenya shillings to public servants. Critics are always asking, do taxpayers get value for money from these projects? Because today, Debt servicing has become one of the largest items in each country's national budget, and every shilling spent on repaying old loans is money that cannot be spent on hospitals, schools, youth employment, or agriculture support. And as the debts grow and repayment needs arise, governments are left with difficult choices: raise tax, cut public services, or borrow even more. The statistics on Uganda and Kenya's debts may seem abstract, but the consequences of such debts are deeply personal for the citizens. When borrowed money is lost to corruption, ordinary people pay the price. Uganda and Kenya are not poor because they borrow. Many countries borrow, and actually some developed countries have bigger debts than Uganda and Kenya combined. But the real question is what happens when the money arrives, how it's spent, what it's spent on, how it's accounted for. The real tragedy is not debt itself, but paying for development that never fully happens. And until corruption is confronted head-on, East Africa risks being trapped in a cycle where citizens inherit the bills while the privileged few walk away with the actual value.